are going to go straight back into it. We're joined by Development Economist at Stellenbosch Business School, Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko, and also joining us this afternoon, our business editor, Xolani Mbanjwa. Our apologies once again for that, Doctor, but thank you so much. So my initial question to you really was what your impressions are on the latest unemployment numbers, and considering specifically that people were not actively looking for jobs during the hard lockdown.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me back. Listen, the reality is that the definition is everything. South Africa is actually at the heart of the issue. I love what's happened with the data release. We have always been looking at what we call the narrow definition of unemployment and not the broad definition. The significant difference, Tammy, is that there is those who are not actively looking for work are not included in the different definitions. And that's wherein lies the difference in the rate. So you'll find that historically, everyone refers to the narrow unemployment definition, which is far lower, by the way, up to 15% in some provinces than the actual narrow definition, which lessens the actual plight. So you're finding now that with the lockdown, the people that actively would look for work or not actively be looking for work have obviously minimized because no one could leave their homes. You were disallowed. You were actually going against the law and the regulations of lockdown if you went out of the house. So, I mean, it's a case in point. Does that mean that unemployment in South Africa has gone down? Absolutely not. In fact, we know that SSA did a temporary survey during the quarter in lockdown, and the incidence of poverty, the incidence of food hunger, the incidence of likelihood of people needing more support has increased because wages have gone down and also unemployment has increased. So the definition. Let South Africa look at the broad definition. Let us stop looking at the narrow definition. It doesn't tell us the true story. The broad definition tells us the reality of what's happening, and that is what we must look at, which is at 42% today. So let's talk about the broad definition. If we're talking unemployment today, I'm not willing to talk about the narrow.
And what you're saying there, Doctor, are exactly the sentiments of so many South Africans who are saying, well, we didn't go out looking for work because we couldn't. So unemployment has not gone down. So clearly an instance where the truth really does lie in the detail. But Xolani, you hop in there. I know you had a Moody's question there.
Yeah, Dr. Moleko, what is interesting is that the fact that some of those who are unemployed could actually not actively look for work also speaks about the backwardness of the job-seeking, methods. We still have, forms we have to sign, whereas we could have, these jobs could have, some of them at least, could have been conducted, these interviews via online. It just doesn't seem to end for South Africa, particularly when you just spoke about the expanded definition, which has increased by 2.3% to 42%. The third quarter really does not look really good, considering that we are now going to be looking at people who are going back to actively look for work.
The hard Quran is looking at discouraged work seekers. The South African definition, if you do include discouraged work seekers, because of let's talk about the labor market. The labor market discrimination and the type of labor market that we have, it's unable to absorb the masses of our youth who exit grade 12. That's number one. And number two is unable to absorb those with low skills in terms of low skills and competencies who don't have your post-qualification or post-matric qualification. So your discouraged workers, you're finding that the large proportion of them have actually not worked for more than 12 months. You're finding that more than 60%. This is significant. The second thing is that the type of activities that you can absorb them in are in your low skill or low level skill because of the level of education that majority of South Africans have who are unemployed. And so there's a double-edged sword where you cannot absorb them because they have not been working, and the type of jobs that they're looking for is at the lower level of skill, and it may not be done virtually, it may not be done on these Microsoft Teams or Zoom platforms because of the nature of the job. So the inhibiting factor is movement. If you're not able to move, you can't go for interviews. And many of them, even if they were looking for workers, if you remember this Q2 release on GDP numbers, the contraction of 51% of GDP is because many of them were not able to produce output. So on the supply side of the economy, there were contractions. On the demand side of the economy, there would be contractions as well. So economic activity, we know, is largely linked to what is happening in the labor market. So the labor market is not happening on its own, because services, skills are provided to an economy so that you can produce output. So I think we have that disjointed effect of the type of labor market that we have and its ability to absorb the majority of our people because of the type of labor market, composition of labor market we have. And I think there's some failures, serious failures there. And until we deal with it from an economic policy perspective, our economic policies have to respond to the issue of, number one, discouraged workforce. We have millions of youth who are no longer looking for a job. They've simply lost hope.
And now,
if we're not able to respond to that, it means that we are not able to deal with the critical issues of a non-growing economy, which is unable to respond to the labor market needs.
And Doctor, what you're talking about really mirrors Moody's sentiments as well. And the question is, what is it that we're doing wrong as South Africa as far as a policy is concerned that would be able to tackle issues such as unemployment? But let me ask, the formal sector lost 1.2 million jobs, but also households were responsible for 311,000 job losses. Do you think that we'll get any of these jobs back? What are the chances of that happening?
We will get them back. I'm not positive based on the sentiment. I am proposing that we put in place an economic plan, economic strategy that talks to labor absorption, that talks to increasing what we call labor intensity. Okay. Our South African growth story and growth trajectory has not seen an increase in the intensity of labor. So the growth sectors that have largely grown have not increased our proportion to absorb the large majority of our people. Agriculture has become capital intensive. Technology has come in to replace people. But not only that, we are deindustrializing. These are labor absorptive manufacturing subsectors, all 9 of them. And you're seeing from an employment generation ability, all of the labor absorptive capabilities, even in the low-level scale of manufacturing, we're not seeing that in South Africa. We have to change that. If we don't deal with the growth of sectors that are not high in labor absorption, we will not deal with the unemployment problem. So the economic policies and the economic instruments that we have, one, must target full employment. We need to revisit monetary policy. We need to revisit fiscal policy. If it's not dealing with the issue of full employment, it's abnormal in any country to have unemployment more than 20%. South Africa, at its best in the last 25 years, has had an unemployment rate of 22.6%. And this was at the peak of our economic growth at 5.6%, 2005, 2006. We have not done better than 22%. In fact, now, after COVID, I think this is the best performance we have seen in terms of unemployment rate post that 2005-06 period, which is fascinating. Of course, what we need to look at is the broad definition of unemployment. And the broad definition, 70% of our youth, based on last quarter's numbers, are unemployed. If you go to provinces, 5 of our provinces have over 40% unemployment rate. 40%. That is a crisis in any country. So we have a situation where the labor market is in crisis.
Dr. Moleko, you are speaking the absolute sentiments of so many South Africans right now. Those are the realities on the ground, irrespective of what the numbers are really saying now. Context in this particular instance is indeed everything. We thank you so much for your time this afternoon.